Can you define open border, Dennis?
Yes, letting anybody who wants to come into this country come in. It's not complex.
And then to be clear, you think that that's the case right now?
That's the case right now. And that is the case what the Democrats want. That is correct.
So if somebody,
They have sanctuary cities all over my state of
excuse me,
California.
sanctuary city has nothing to do with immigration
Oh,
policy.
as sure as it does. If you are here illegally, we will not allow ICE or anyone else to take you away. You can come. That's what sanctuary city means.
That is not what a sanctuary city is.
Oh,
That's
really?
not what a
does it
sanctuary.
mean?
Sure, I can tell you what it means.
Before we get into this one, I just want to ask Destiny one question. Since when do states get to harbor federal criminals? So in this one, Destiny gives us a whole bunch of crap that he throws against the wall that we have to filter through. But thankfully, Dennis Prager is on the other side of this debate, even though he's on David Pakman's show, so you know it's going to be a 2 against 1. But I love these kind of debates because these progressives, these Democrats, these lefties, whatever you want to call them, they always expose themselves, and the truth always prevails. And that's what I'm looking forward to seeing the most. So let's get into it.
I want to talk a little bit about what's happening now with the presidential race, which has been upended by Joe Biden deciding that he is not going to seek re-election. Dennis, I know from listening to you that you are not likely someone who is going to vote for the current vice president to be the next president of the United States. I don't think that'll come as a shock to our audience. What I am curious about is, do you see her as simply an elected official running a campaign with whom you disagree? Or do you believe that there is the sort of danger of a Kamala Harris presidency that some associate with another presidency for Donald Trump?
I didn't get the part on the Donald Trump. Do I see her as a dangerous
there is a view that Donald Trump represents a threat to democracy, and that's a phrase that we hear frequently.
Oh, I see. Yeah. So
I'm curious whether you see Kamala Harris simply as an elected official you disagree with, or do you feel that the word threat or danger applies?
Yeah, my position and my last column actually was on this subject. To me, it is completely irrelevant which leftist runs.
Really?
Kamala Harris, Nancy Pelosi, Adam Schiff, Gavin Newsom, it is completely irrelevant. They're utterly interchangeable. All leftists damage everything they touch. This has been true from Lenin until the current leftists, wherever they are, not liberals. I have great respect for liberals. I think they're naive, but I have great respect for them. Liberalism and conservatism have a great deal in common. Liberalism has nothing in common with leftism. Leftism hates liberalism. Leftism is illiberalism.
So what Dennis is talking about here, the difference between leftists and liberals, is something that a lot of people don't know the actual difference between, including myself. And so I went ahead and put a graphic on the screen. You guys can pause and read through right there. I don't want to go through everything and waste your guys' time, but I'll leave it on the screen there for a minute. You guys can pause, read through, and then we'll just continue with this debate here.
Anti-liberalism. So I don't care who the leftist is who runs, whether it's Kamala Harris or Gavin Newsom or somebody else. They are utterly interchangeable. Same with Joe Biden. It doesn't matter to me. I listed in one of my columns 25 institutions that the left is destroying, from the universities to the high schools to the elementary schools to the American Medical Association, which has announced that no birth certificate should list the sex of a child because we don't know what the sex is. The child will determine later. That's the American Medical Association, because the left has taken over the AMA. The left has taken over just about everything and destroyed everything, from the Boy Scouts to military recruitment, to music, to art, to architecture. Leftism is a shark. It's a destruction machine. So
okay, that's a lot, Dennis. Let's allow Stephen to weigh in on that, and a couple of specific points that Dennis made there. One is that there's an interchangeability to who is the Democratic candidate. Number two, that leftism destroys everything it touches. And number three, he mentioned Leninism sort of in the same breath as modern Democrats. Do you think that's an apt analogy?
One thing's for sure, leftism certainly wrecked Destiny's life, or should I say, Stephen's life.
I fully agree with Dennis that illiberal people are a danger to society. Right now, there's only one very popular illiberal candidate. That is easily Donald Trump. When you want to talk about people destroying democratic institutions, I would argue that probably one of the most important institutions that we have in the United States is the vote, is the idea, the concept of the peaceful transfer of power. Donald Trump, in multiple ways, whether it was by encouraging people to lie and submit false electorate votes to Congress, whether it was through a multi-channel pressure against his vice president, of which Pence has come out and spoken plenty about, to get Pence to throw away the actual votes on January 6th. Whether it was getting his attorney generals to write a letter to different states to lie about them having found voter fraud, whether it was Donald Trump lying to the American public, to Raffensperger, to people, to state legislatures in Arizona, Nevada, New Mexico, like all of these things, all of these actions were taken to circumvent the peaceful transfer of power, which I think is probably one of the cornerstones of a liberal democracy, of a democratic republic, of a constitutional republic, where we are allowed to vote on a change in leadership and where that leadership is expected to back down or step down if they've lost the vote.
Everything that Donald Trump did was completely through the courts and had a precedent that was started by the Democrats from the Democratic Party. So what Destiny just said there is a complete cop-out, and it's a lie.
So insofar as illiberalism is a huge threat in this country, I agree, but it is exclusively coming from the right now. I don't think that the leftist candidates are leftist at all and that they're socialist or communist. Ironically, as Prager was complaining about calling everybody a Nazi, I know that Republicans have been in the business of calling everybody a communist for decades. I know because I grew up as a Republican and I used to listen to Rush Limbaugh talk about the commies every single day. So this idea that all of these candidates on the left are leftist, I don't think is true in any sense of the word. They're liberal. That's why the examples that Dennis gives of them destroying institutions are whether or not you list birth on a on a birth certificate, whether or not you list the sex or the Boy Scouts, or music or art or architecture. I think that threats to our democracy or the liberal order, I think, are far more evident when you look at the Republicans' attacks on our judicial system, on giving the executive branch, for instance, the power to have criminal immunity when the president takes certain acts. When you talk about trying to overthrow the election, I mean, like you can go on and on. Like the attacks on institutions from the right are far more damaging than any perceived attacks from the left.
What about that, Dennis? Because I hear Stephen arguing that there's been sort of a reshuffling here where the illiberalism or authoritarianism is, he argues, now coming from the MAGA wing of the Republican Party. Even if you don't like leftists, would you concede that he's right to some degree about the authoritarianism?
No, because Donald Trump was president for 4 years. And we had far more freedom under Donald Trump than under Joe Biden.
How so?
We could give, the number of mandates, for example, in the government and done by through the CDC and NIH. If you don't wear a mask, you're fired. If you don't get a vaccine, you're fired. If you speak dissent at a college, you're fired. The whole culture of speaking to big tech and telling them what you consider misinformation from the government. As the Prime Minister of New Zealand infamously announced, if you don't hear it from the government, it is not true. That's a left-wing position. All truth, and that's why I compare it to Leninism, which was my field. I studied Russian. I went to the Soviet Union a number of times, and he called the Soviet communist paper Pravda, means truth. Truth is what the left says truth is. For 2 years, they lied. The Columbia Journalism Review, published by a rather non-right-wing institution, the most sophisticated or prestigious journalism school in America, Columbia University, wrote a gigantic piece, a major piece, on how much the New York Times and Washington Post lied about collusion between Trump and the Russian campaign. And if you differed with that, as you differ with anything, you were dismissed. And you were misinformation, and the way in which they have taken over Google. But all of this is nothing compared to Donald Trump. But Donald Trump was president for 4 years. What did he do during those 4 years? Forget for the moment, I know you can't, because everything is based on January 6th. Up till January 5th of 2021, what did Trump do in 4 years in power that compares to Biden's and the Democrats' suppression of freedom in this country?
Well, let's let Stephen answer. And I think, to be fair, Dennis, I'm just kind of an arbiter here. Some of the things you mentioned with regard to masks and vaccines, I believe they happened while Trump was president, not Joe Biden. But I'll let Stephen, if he wants to address that. But to Dennis's question, up until January 5th, 2021, what was the illiberalism from Trump?
I would argue that the illiberalism from Trump was Trump's inability to work with Congress and trying to usurp as much power in the executive as possible to do things unilaterally as the executive without getting any kind of congressional approval or legislation from Congress, congressional, obviously. So like an example of this might be he was unable to bring Congress together to get anything done insofar as the border or immigration goes. So instead,
Hold up. It was a Democrat-led House leader, Nancy Pelosi, in Congress that didn't get together with Donald Trump on his policies. He was forced to write presidential executive orders, and not once did they ever come together on anything that he proposed. There's a famous saying that was going on around the time that if Trump cured cancer, if Trump came up with a cure for cancer, the Democrats would fight against him, which was true. So you can't say that Trump wouldn't get together with Congress. It was Congress that wouldn't get together with him. Not only that, it was the Republican-led House in the first 2 years that wouldn't get together with him when it came to fixing and repealing the health care bill. And that, in my opinion, is probably why Donald Trump quit trying to push a new health care reform, because the main thing that people were concerned about was the stupid tax penalty that was associated with it. So at least he got that part done for Americans.
So instead, he relies on his executive power during times of great emergency to send the military down to the border. That's a usurping of power by the executive to try to run immigration policy on the executive. I don't think that was a very good thing because he couldn't get Congress together to do it. I think that his undermining, even if we ignore January 6th itself, and I'll ignore the electorate for fraud and everything else that he did leading up to December 14th and beyond, all of the claims that Donald Trump made about how the vote is going to be rigged, mail-in ballots are going to be rigged. Notice that if you listen to his rhetoric, he never says, this is what we need to do to secure mail-in ballots. This is what we need to do to make sure that our election is safe. All he wanted to do was get rid of mail-in ballots because he knew that Democrats were more likely to vote that way than Republicans. He had no desire to make the election safe. He only wanted to make sure that the election was going to be won by him. When you talk,
So that also wasn't true. Everybody was concerned that having unsolicited mass mail-in ballots with no chain of command could be an issue to any general election. It had never been done before, and not only Donald Trump was concerned, but everyday average Americans were concerned. It's the contrary. Everybody on the Democratic side was for it because they believed having unsolicited mass mail-in ballots without a chain of command would actually help them because they know that Republicans vote on election day. They don't trust sending their vote through the mail and all that type of stuff. So with that being said, we need to understand that this year you need to go out and vote in person as early as those polls open. Don't wait till election day, and don't let any opportunities for anything to come up on election day that might hold you back from going out there and casting your ballot, because everybody's ballot does matter. So don't get fooled in thinking, oh, my one vote won't matter. It does, okay? So go out and do it. And like I said, vote early and vote in person and vote for Donald Trump. And frankly, vote for Republicans down ticket, because then Donald Trump won't be handcuffed by Congress or the House or any of that stuff. So get her done.
him. When you talk about like big tech and you talk about trying to take away freedoms using big tech, well, we just had Twitter being purchased by Elon Musk, who is, if you watch any of his tweets, is clearly a right-wing supporter. All of his speech and all of his support goes to right-wing candidates or right-wing talking points. And if you talk about a threat to the freedom of tech, well, the biggest threat that was represented to tech was when conservatives wanted to bash Twitter and Facebook over the head with restricting their section or rescinding their Section 230 protections, which would have allowed you to sue essentially people that hosted other people's posts for things that those people posted. You want to talk about destroying big tech or censoring big tech, removing Section 230 protections would have been the number one way to do it. And then when you want to talk about like requests made by big tech, if you want to call those censorship, we got the full Twitter files leaks. And as much as Republicans try to rewrite the record, Taibbi himself said, when it comes to the New York Post story, for instance, there was not a single example. There was no evidence whatsoever of government intrusion into Twitter to ask them to remove that story. But you better believe when that one comedian lady said that Donald Trump was I think a pussy ass bitch, she tweeted, Donald Trump sent in a request to Twitter to have them remove that tweet because he didn't like it. So if you want to talk about like big tech censorship or attempts to do so, we can talk about Elon Musk's acquisition of Twitter. We can talk about the types of requests that Donald Trump sent into Twitter, as opposed to the Biden administration, who when they sent in requests for specific tweets to be taken down, it was because they were of pictures of Hunter Biden. I'll just say that, not even close to comparable. And
it's definitely comparable, especially with the way that Twitter allowed porn to be all over its website. So all of a sudden, it's Hunter Biden and it matters now? Yeah, right, dude. But one thing's for sure that we learned in the Twitter files was that the FBI the Democratic Party, they all had back channels, direct back channels, talking to Twitter, discussions going back and forth. It was all exposed, or maybe not all of it even, but a lot of it was exposed in the Twitter files. You didn't see any of that from the Republican Party. You didn't see any of that from Donald Trump. Yeah, he might have sent out a request to have something taken down. That's way different. It's not comparable one bit. And just yesterday, Mark Zuckerberg came out and said that this time he won't be censoring free speech, which means that he did last time. He even admitted on Joe Rogan's podcast that he was censoring free speech last time. He said he's not going to do it this time. And give me a break when you say that Elon Musk is this crazy right-winger nowadays, right? The only thing that he sides with when he changed Twitter to X is free speech. It's his life experience and the truth that has made him align more with the Republican Party nowadays. He said up until this current election, he has never voted for a Republican in his life. So when Democrats are switching over to the Republican Party, it's not for the sake of, I just want to be cool. It's for the sake of truth. It's for the sake of, I can't go down the same path that the Democrats are taking us anymore. RFK Jr. just switched. Tulsi Gabbard just switched. Mark Zuckerberg looks like he might be switching. And Elon Musk switched. So stop with the nonsense and wise up, just like they did, okay? All of those people, as well as the rest of us, experienced what 4 years was like under Trump's presidency and what 4 years was like under Biden and Kamala. And there's no comparison. People want Trump. People loved the way that life was under Trump. They had money in their pockets and interest rates were low and things were going good for America in general. But I really want to hear what Dennis Prager has to say to rebuttal this, and then we'll go ahead and wrap this one up.
And yeah, when you talk about like authoritarian actions, I think that one of the largest authoritarian actions you can take is to try to usurp as much power for yourself as possible. And that might be done in terms of running things that should be done by Congress, like immigration policy, by using the military. That might be done in ways of like undermining an upcoming election and saying that the election is going to be fraudulent, or it might be done in ways of like avoiding ever being held responsible for things that you do for criminal activity, right? The Supreme Court's granted him criminal immunity. He wasn't impeached in the Senate because they said, oh, well, we can't impeach him. He's already out of office. And he pardoned almost every single person that worked with him. Why would he pardon people like Paul Manafort? That's so crazy. I understand why people might want to argue for pardons for maybe like Flynn or maybe Stone, but Paul Manafort, why? It was so crazy. You can look up how many pardons he's done on the presidential website. It's insane compared to any other president.
What do you think, Dennis? I mean, certainly it sounds like a lot of unilateral action for sure. Do you defend all of the things? Do you dispute that Trump did any of the things Stephen mentioned? And if you don't dispute it, do you defend it?
Yeah, he started to build a wall. That was I don't know whether it's in his province or not. I don't know what the law is, but it is true. He could not get Congress to agree because the Democrats, since Ted Kennedy in the 1990s, have worked to open the border. You cannot have a civilization with an open border. That is a given. I assume Stephen would agree with that open border and keeping a country intact are mutually exclusive. Can we agree on that?
Yeah, that's why nobody asks for an open border.
Oh, yes, the Democrats do. I mean, if you deny that, that's good. You'll be on record then as saying...
Well, define it as policy, Dennis, so we could agree.
This is really critical, really critical. Do you believe, Stephen, that the Democrats have been for a controlled border and not for an open border in the last 10 years?
I think the Democrats tried to pass comprehensive legislation that was written by Lankford, a Republican in the Senate. I think Donald Trump and the Republicans are the ones that killed that, and that was on public record. So no, the Democrats have not been for open borders.
Okay, you believe the Democrats are for a closed border? Okay,
it's not just closed or open, but nobody's
define it though for us.
The border is a very complicated thing.
Can you define what you mean?
It is very complicated.
It's not complicated.
I'm sorry that you just don't have much information about immigration or the border.
Okay, good. All right. As I said, I prefer clarity to agreement.
Can you define open border, Dennis?
Yes, letting anybody who wants to come into this country come in. It's not complex.
And then to be clear, you think that that's the case right now?
That's the case right now. And that is the case what the Democrats want. That is correct. They have sanctuary cities all over my state.
Excuse me, sanctuary city has nothing to do with immigration policy.
Oh, sure as it does. If you are here illegally, we will not allow ICE or anyone else to take you away. You can come That's what sanctuary city
That
means.
is not what a sanctuary city is. That's
really?
not what a
does it
sanctuary.
mean?
Sure, I can tell you what it means. When it comes to enforcing immigration, that is exclusively in the purview of the United States government. Now, it tends to be the case that if you're a state official, you can collect information about whether or not a person is here legally or not. And if you want, you can turn that information over to federal authorities like Immigrations and Customs Enforcement or like the Department of Homeland Security. You don't have an obligation to do so. And some cities explicitly say we won't. So a sanctuary city is just a city where if they arrest you, they're not going to do an immigration check. And if you fail, they're going to turn you over to the federal authorities. As somebody that is a conservative, who I imagine would have an appreciation for the concept of federalism, but the important protections of states' rights, because that's what we said when we threw abortion back to the states, you should champion a state deciding whether or not they would want to cooperate with a federal authority when it comes to turning somebody over for matters of deportation. But a sanctuary city does not legalize illegal immigration. It's just whether or not a city wants to cooperate with federal investigators when it comes to turning over an undocumented citizen or immigrant.
Fine. Okay, we can continue.
Do you agree with that, Dennis? I mean, do you recognize that it's an issue of state?
The issue of people crossing a federal border is a federal issue. It is not just a state issue. Okay, it is so elementary. It's a national border. It's not just a state border.
I'd be really careful with that, because that wasn't Abbott's argument when he wanted to enforce the border in Texas. He said that the Texas National Guard should be that way. You just used the Biden administration.
Because there's no federal oversight. Because the Democrats are happy to have a great number of people come in. They're potential Democratic voters in their view.
And it's as simple as that. The Democrat leadership, they know that the people are aborting their children, that they're cutting off their genitals. And it's as simple as that. The Democratic Party knows that the long game is being lost by their own party, right? They abort all their children. And it's as simple as that. The Democratic Party knows that they're losing in the long game. They abort all their children, and they're basically sterilizing all of the children that make it through that. And that's the simple. And that's the simple truth. The Democratic Party knows that they're losing the long game, right? They abort all their children, and the ones that actually make it to life, they want to sterilize them with puberty blockers and things like that, with these gender reassignment things. So they know that their next generation of voters have to come from somewhere else. And so their goal is, before the next census, to import as many people into this country that will be thankful to the Democratic Party. And that's why they're making it so public. That's why it's very obvious which party wants people to come in illegally across the border and which party doesn't, because they want those people to be loyal to them whenever they go and count the next census. They can get extra electoral representation with a bigger population in these Democratic centers. That's also why they have these sanctuary cities. They're pumping a bunch of people into these cities that will eventually add up to more electoral votes coming out of those areas. Even if those people can't individually vote, what matters is the electoral vote is what will be submitted, right? And that's if these people aren't given. And that's if these people aren't allowed to vote by the time that happens. Which is why it was important not to pass that last bill that Destiny blames Donald Trump for stopping, right? It's because they wanted to get more people down there to the border so that they could count more people, so that they could actually put them on asylum, give them work visas, and then eventually say, look, these people are working here, they're seeking asylum, they're not going anywhere else, so they might as well become citizens, be put on Social Security, and have the right to vote as individuals. It's way different than just having illegal immigrants all over the country. Essentially paving the path to citizenship and allowing these people to vote legally. essentially paving the way for these people to vote legally, essentially paving the way to citizenship and allowing these people to vote legally, get on Social Security at our expense, at the people that have been here their whole life, giving paycheck after paycheck. At the expense of people that have lived their whole life here and have worked to make their lives better, to make their own country better, and have paid in week after week since they started working as teenagers, and who have paid into Social Security weekly, since they started working as teenagers, at the expense of the people that have worked here, who are now at risk of not receiving, who are now, in my opinion, at risk of losing those Social Security benefits when the time comes for them to retire. It's disgraceful what the Democratic Party is doing to our country. It's very obvious to the people that are paying attention. And with that, I'm just going to wrap it up there. I think I'll wrap up this video. If you agree with what I said, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you guys in the next one.